They only knew her as ma'am or medic, until one day, a visiting pilot walked in, looked at her, snapped to attention, and called her by her old call sign. That one word changed everything, because they realized she wasn't just support. She used to lead missions no one dared to talk about. Lieutenant Commander Rachel Doc Sullivan had been assigned to Naval Special Warfare Training Center for exactly 7 weeks. At 5 feet 7 inches with dark brown hair, always pulled back in a regulation bun, and sharp green eyes that seemed to notice everything while revealing nothing, she moved through her medical duties with the kind of professional efficiency that made her practically invisible to most personnel. She carried her medical bag with practiced precision, treated injuries with clinical competence, and maintained the kind of low profile that characterized the best military medical officers. To the SEAL candidates and training staff, she was simply their assigned medical officer, competent, reliable, and completely unremarkable. The candidates knew her only by her formal title and role. Ma'am, when they needed to address her directly. Medic, when they talked about her among themselves. Or doc, in the casual way that military personnel refer to medical staff. None of them had ever wondered about her background, her previous assignments, or what experiences had shaped her into the medical officer they saw every day. She was medical support, nothing more, someone who kept them healthy enough to continue their brutal training regimen. Commander Sullivan's daily routine was predictable and professional. She arrived early, reviewed candidate medical files, attended training briefings to understand the day's evolution and potential injury risks, positioned herself strategically during training exercises, and provided immediate medical care when needed. Her competence was unquestioned, her professionalism was absolute, and her presence was taken for granted by everyone at the facility. But assumptions can be dangerous, especially when they're made about people whose true backgrounds remain carefully hidden. Welcome to Silent Salute, where we discover that extraordinary capabilities often hide behind the most ordinary professional roles. Before we continue this incredible story, tell us in the comments which country you're watching from today. And if you believe that the most dangerous assumptions are those we make about people who seem to fit perfectly into expected roles, hit that subscribe button to support our channel. We're honored to share these remarkable stories with you. Class 284 was particularly demanding. 30 candidates from diverse military backgrounds, all pushing themselves through training designed to identify and develop America's most elite warriors. The daily routine was relentless, brutal physical conditioning, advanced weapons training, underwater demolition exercises, tactical simulations, and psychological challenges that tested every aspect of human endurance and determination. Through it all, Commander Sullivan provided medical support with the same steady competence that had characterized her entire assignment. The candidates had developed their standard assumptions about her role and capabilities. She was professional medical support who ensured they remained healthy enough to continue training. Her medical knowledge was comprehensive, her emergency response skills were excellent, and her ability to handle training-related injuries was unquestioned. But she was also remarkably reserved, speaking only when necessary for medical purposes and never engaging in the casual conversations that typically developed between medical personnel and the candidates they supported. Among the candidates was Gunnery Sergeant Michael Torres, a former Marine Corps Force reconnaissance operator who'd served multiple combat deployments before applying for SEAL training. Torres was respected by his fellow candidates for his tactical expertise and leadership abilities, but he shared the common assumption that medical personnel operated outside the warrior culture that defined special operations. Doc Sullivan knows her medical stuff, Torres had commented to his teammate during their 6th week, but she's probably the most reserved medical officer I've ever worked with. Professional as hell, but you never get any sense of who she actually is beyond the medical degree. Petty Officer Jackson, who'd served as a Navy corpsman before. SEAL training offered some perspective. Some medical officers are just focused on maintaining professional boundaries, Torres. Doesn't mean they don't understand what we're doing out here. But Torres's observation was accurate. Commander Sullivan's professional distance was unusual even for military medical personnel. Most doctors and nurses developed some level of personal rapport with the personnel they supported, but Commander Sullivan maintained a clinical detachment that seemed almost impersonal. The situation that would change everything began during the 8th week of training, when Class 284 was scheduled for advanced close-quarters battle exercises. This was one of the most intense phases of SEAL training, where candidates learned sophisticated combat techniques, weapons handling, and tactical procedures that could mean the difference between life and death in operational environments. Commander Sullivan was assigned to provide medical support for the training evolution, positioned at her standard observation point, where she could monitor candidates for signs of injury while remaining ready to respond immediately to medical emergencies. Her role was essentially what it had always been: professional medical oversight and emergency response capability. The training was being conducted in a specialized facility designed for realistic combat scenarios. The exercises were carefully controlled, with multiple safety protocols and experienced instructors supervising every aspect of the training. But close-quarters battle training always carried inherent risks of serious injury that required immediate medical attention. During a break in the morning training session, the facility received an unexpected visitor. Lieutenant Commander Jake "Viper" Morrison, a Navy helicopter pilot, had arrived to discuss air support procedures for upcoming training evolutions. Morrison was an experienced special operations pilot who'd flown countless missions supporting SEAL teams in combat environments, and his expertise was regularly utilized to enhance the realism of training scenarios. Morrison entered the training area to meet with the senior instructors, scanning the facility to get oriented to the layout and current training activities. His attention was focused on understanding the tactical setup and identifying where his helicopter support would be most effectively integrated into future training exercises. As Morrison walked through the training area, his gaze swept across the various personnel, instructors, candidates, and support staff who made the training possible. His attention was professional and routine until it reached the medical station where Commander Sullivan was organizing her equipment. Morrison stopped walking. His entire demeanor changed from casual professional assessment to something much more intense: recognition mixed with what appeared to be genuine surprise and respect. He stared at Commander Sullivan for several seconds, as if processing something unexpected and significant. Then, without warning, he snapped to rigid military attention and called out in a voice that carried clearly across the training area. "Nightingale." The single word hit the training facility like a thunderclap. Morrison's voice was filled with unmistakable recognition, respect, and something that sounded like awe. But more importantly, the word wasn't a name. It was clearly a military call sign, the kind of operational identifier used only in the most classified and dangerous military missions. Commander Sullivan looked up from her medical supplies, and for the first time since her assignment to the training facility, her professional composure cracked slightly. Her eyes met Morrison's, and something passed between them. A moment of recognition that suggested shared experiences and mutual respect that went far beyond routine military interactions. "Viper," she replied quietly, her voice carrying a warmth and familiarity that no one at the training facility had ever heard before. Morrison held his position of attention for several more seconds, then slowly relaxed into a less formal posture. But his expression remained filled with obvious respect and recognition. "Ma'am," Morrison said, "I had no idea you were assigned here. It's an honor to see you again." The candidates and instructors who had witnessed this exchange were trying to process what they'd seen. The reserved medical officer they'd known for weeks had just been recognized by an experienced special operations pilot, addressed by what was clearly an operational call sign, and treated with the kind of respect typically reserved for senior combat leaders. Torres, who'd been closest to the interaction, approached Commander Sullivan with obvious curiosity and respect. "Ma'am, that pilot seemed to recognize you from previous assignments. Have you two worked together before?" Commander Sullivan's response was carefully neutral. "Lieutenant Commander Morrison and I have crossed paths in previous assignments." But Morrison, still clearly impressed by the unexpected encounter, was less reserved about providing context. "Cross paths," he said, with obvious respect in his voice. "Ma'am, that's an understatement." Morrison looked around at the candidates and instructors who were listening to the conversation, then made a decision about how much information to share. "Gentlemen," Morrison said, "you've been working with one of the most decorated special operations officers in the Navy. Commander Sullivan isn't just medical support. She's someone who's led missions that most people don't have the clearance to know about. The revelation hit the training area like a physical blow. The quiet medical officer they'd been taking for granted was actually a decorated special operations veteran with experience in classified missions that exceeded the backgrounds of most personnel at the facility. Jackson stepped forward with obvious respect and curiosity. "Commander Sullivan, sir, if you don't mind me asking, what was your previous assignment before medical duty?" Commander Sullivan seemed to be weighing how much information to share, understanding that Morrison's recognition had already revealed more about her background than she'd intended to disclose. "My previous assignments involved specialized operations that required both tactical and medical capabilities," she replied carefully. But Morrison, still clearly impressed by the encounter, was willing to provide more context. Commander Sullivan was a team leader for some of the most classified rescue and recovery operations in the special operations community. The call sign Nightingale was earned through missions where she led teams into hostile territory to extract wounded personnel under impossible conditions. The candidates were beginning to understand that their medical officer had operational experience that exceeded their own training and probably their future assignments. Leading classified rescue operations was among the most dangerous and demanding work in the military. Torres asked the question everyone was thinking. "Commander, how do you go from leading special operations teams to providing medical support for training exercises?" Commander Sullivan's answer reflected the complex career paths that characterize the most experienced military professionals. Military careers involve multiple phases of service. Sometimes the most valuable contribution you can make is sharing experience with the next generation of operators. Master Chief Petty Officer Williams, the senior instructor who'd been observing the entire interaction, approached with obvious interest in understanding Commander Sullivan's background and its implications for training operations. "Commander Sullivan," Williams said, "I'm beginning to understand that your background might be more relevant to our training operations than we initially realized. Would you be willing to discuss how your operational experience might enhance our training scenarios?" Commander Sullivan considered the question carefully, understanding that Morrison's recognition had fundamentally changed her role at the training facility. "Master Chief, I believe my operational experience could contribute to developing more realistic training scenarios that better prepare candidates for the complexities of actual missions." Williams was intrigued by the possibility. "Commander, what specific aspects of training could benefit from your operational experience?" "Scenarios where medical and tactical responsibilities intersect, where rescue operations must be conducted under hostile conditions, and where team leaders must make life and death decisions about personnel recovery under extreme stress." Williams understood that Commander Sullivan was offering to share training methodologies and operational insights that came from leading some of the most dangerous missions in the special operations community. The conversation was interrupted when the facility's security alarm activated, indicating an immediate threat that required emergency response. An armed intruder had somehow gained access to the training facility and was moving through the complex in an unpredictable and dangerous manner. "All personnel implement immediate lockdown procedures," the facility's public address system announced. "Armed intruder on base. Remain in secure positions until further notice." The candidates and instructors immediately implemented their training, seeking defensive positions and preparing to protect themselves and others until security forces could neutralize the threat. But the intruder's location and intentions were unknown, creating a situation where personnel throughout the facility were potentially at risk. Commander Sullivan was positioned near the entrance to the training area, relatively exposed to potential threat from multiple directions. The standard protocol would be for her to seek secure cover and wait for security forces to resolve the situation. Instead, she did something that shocked everyone who witnessed it. Commander Sullivan moved toward the sound of the disturbance with the kind of calm, purposeful advance that suggested she knew exactly what she was doing. She didn't seek cover, didn't call for help, and didn't wait for security forces to arrive. She simply walked directly toward danger with the confidence of someone who had handled similar situations many times before. "Commander," Torres called out, "the protocol is to shelter in place until security arrives." But Commander Sullivan continued moving toward the threat, and her response revealed capabilities that none of them had suspected. "The protocol assumes that medical personnel are non-combatants who require protection," she replied without slowing her advance. That assumption doesn't apply here. What happened next demonstrated why Commander Sullivan had earned the call sign Nightingale, and why Lieutenant Commander Morrison had shown such obvious respect for her capabilities. The armed intruder appeared at the entrance to the training area, clearly agitated and carrying what appeared to be a military-style rifle. He was shouting incoherently about grievances against the military and seemed intent on causing harm to anyone he encountered. Commander Sullivan assessed the situation with the kind of tactical evaluation that comes from extensive combat experience. The intruder was approximately 30 feet away, armed with a rifle, but clearly inexperienced with tactical movement and situational awareness. Instead of seeking cover or waiting for backup, Commander Sullivan did something that defied everything the candidates thought they knew about their medical officer. She advanced directly toward the armed intruder with a movement pattern that was clearly tactical rather than medical. Her approach was deliberate, controlled, and designed to minimize the intruder's ability to effectively use his weapon while maximizing her own tactical advantages. "Sir," Commander Sullivan called out in a voice that carried absolute authority despite the obvious danger. "You need to put down the weapon and surrender to security personnel." The intruder turned toward her, raising the rifle in a threatening gesture. "Stay back. I'm not going to let you people stop me." But Commander Sullivan continued her advance, and what happened next took less than 10 seconds, but demonstrated tactical capabilities that exceeded those of most military personnel. She moved with the kind of speed and precision that comes from extensive training in close-quarters combat. Using tactical movement techniques that minimized her exposure to the rifle, she closed the distance to the intruder before he could effectively aim or fire. Her disarmament technique was textbook perfect, a combination of striking techniques, leverage, and weapon retention procedures that neutralized the threat with minimal risk of injury to anyone involved. Within seconds, the intruder was on the ground, disarmed, and controlled by submission techniques that prevented further resistance. Commander Sullivan secured the weapon, checked the intruder for additional threats, and then immediately provided medical assessment to ensure that her control techniques hadn't caused serious injury. "Intruder neutralized," she reported calmly into her radio. "One individual secured, weapon recovered, no injuries to personnel. Request security response." For custody transfer, the entire sequence had taken less than 10 seconds. The armed intruder had gone from threatening multiple people with a rifle to being safely controlled and receiving medical care. The training area was completely silent. 30 SEAL candidates, multiple instructors, and a special operations pilot stood frozen, staring at a medical officer who had just neutralized an armed threat with techniques that exceeded the capabilities of most military personnel. Morrison was the first to speak, and his voice was filled with the kind of recognition that comes from understanding exceptional capability. "That," Morrison said quietly, "is why they called her Nightingale. She didn't just rescue people. She fought her way through whatever was necessary to reach them." Torres approached Commander Sullivan with obvious respect and amazement. "Commander, where did you learn those techniques?" Commander Sullivan was checking the secured intruder's vital signs while responding. Previous operational assignments required integration of medical and tactical capabilities. You can't rescue people in hostile territory if you can't neutralize threats that prevent you from reaching them. Jackson asked the question everyone was thinking. "Commander, what kind of operations were you leading that required those capabilities?" Commander Sullivan's answer provided insight into missions that most military personnel never encounter. Rescue operations in denied territory, medical evacuation under hostile fire, and personnel recovery missions where traditional support wasn't available. Master Chief Williams, who had witnessed the entire incident, understood that Commander Sullivan's demonstration had revealed capabilities that fundamentally changed her role at the training facility. "Commander Sullivan," Williams said, "I think it's time we discussed expanding your role here beyond standard medical support." Commander Sullivan accepted the expanded role, understanding that Morrison's recognition and the intruder incident had revealed capabilities that could contribute to SEAL training in ways that had never been possible before. Over the following weeks, Commander Sullivan transitioned from her cover role as routine medical support to active participation in training development. Her combination of medical expertise and tactical leadership experience created training scenarios that were far more realistic and challenging than anything previously available. What we're developing, Master Chief Williams explained to the training staff, is integrated training that reflects the reality of modern special operations. Medical emergencies occur during tactical operations. Rescue missions require both medical and combat capabilities. These skills must be integrated, not separated. Commander Sullivan worked with the training staff to create scenarios that tested candidates' ability to provide medical care under hostile conditions, to conduct rescue operations when traditional support wasn't available, and to make tactical decisions that balanced medical requirements with mission success. The operations I led, Commander Sullivan explained to the candidates, required understanding that medical and tactical responsibilities aren't separate functions. When you're extracting wounded personnel from hostile territory, you're simultaneously a medic, a tactical leader, and a combat operator. Success depends on integrating all these capabilities seamlessly. Her training scenarios included realistic combat medical situations where candidates had to provide care while under fire, rescue simulations where medical personnel led tactical teams, and decision-making exercises where medical and tactical requirements had to be balanced under extreme stress. Lieutenant Commander Morrison, who had triggered the revelation of Commander Sullivan's background, became a regular participant in the enhanced training programs. His helicopter support operations were integrated with Commander Sullivan's rescue scenarios, creating training that reflected the complex coordination required for actual special operations missions. Working with Nightingale again, Morrison told the candidates, reminds me why she was so effective as a team leader. She understood that successful operations require integration of all capabilities: medical, tactical, aviation, and leadership. The candidates quickly learned that Commander Sullivan's operational experience provided insights that enhanced every aspect of their training. Her understanding of tactical medicine, personnel recovery, and decision-making under extreme stress created learning opportunities that exceeded anything available through conventional training methods. Torres, who had initially questioned Commander Sullivan's reserved demeanor, became one of her most dedicated students. Commander, your approach to integrating medical and tactical capabilities has completely changed how I think about special operations. You've shown us that the most effective operators are those who can fulfill multiple roles seamlessly. Jackson, the former corpsman, was particularly influenced by Commander Sullivan's perspective on combat medicine. Ma'am, your experience has taught me that medical personnel in special operations aren't just support. They're full team members whose medical expertise enhances rather than compromises tactical effectiveness. The training programs that Commander Sullivan developed were eventually adopted throughout Special Operations Commands, establishing new standards for integrated medical tactical capability. Her methods influenced military training worldwide and enhanced the effectiveness of special operations personnel globally. But perhaps Commander Sullivan's greatest contribution was demonstrating that true operational excellence required integration of multiple capabilities rather than narrow specialization. Her experience leading classified rescue operations had provided insights that enhanced training for all special operations personnel. The story of Commander Nightingale Sullivan became legendary at the training facility, shared with new classes as an example of how extraordinary capabilities often hide behind ordinary professional roles. Her example reminded candidates that in special operations, the most valuable people are often those whose true experience and capabilities remain carefully hidden. The most important lesson you can learn here, instructors would tell new candidates, is that exceptional capability often comes in unexpected forms. The person providing medical support might be someone who's led missions more dangerous than anything you'll ever encounter. Years later, when Commander Sullivan transitioned to other assignments, her legacy lived on in the enhanced training programs she developed and in the understanding that true professional excellence often requires maintaining operational security about capabilities and experience. Her story reminded everyone that in special operations, as in life, the most dangerous assumptions are those we make about people who seem to fit perfectly into expected roles, because the most exceptional people are often those who choose to hide their extraordinary capabilities behind ordinary professional responsibilities. Commander Sullivan's call sign, Nightingale, became synonymous with the integration of medical and tactical excellence, representing the highest standards of special operations capability and the understanding that the most effective leaders are those who can fulfill any role required for mission success. Morrison's simple recognition of her call sign had revealed not just individual capability, but a broader understanding of how the most exceptional military professionals contribute to developing the next generation of warriors. Her willingness to share operational experience through training development demonstrated that true leadership continues long after operational assignments end. The moment when Morrison had snapped to attention and called out Nightingale had lasted only seconds, but its impact continued for years, reminding everyone that extraordinary capabilities often hide behind the most ordinary appearances, and that the people we take for granted may be the ones with the most important contributions to make. This story was brought to you by Silent Salute. Before we leave you today, here's our question. Have you ever discovered that someone you knew in a routine professional capacity actually possessed extraordinary experience or capabilities that they kept hidden? Have you encountered people whose true backgrounds were far more remarkable than their current roles suggested? Tell us in the comments about the moments when you realized you'd been working alongside someone whose experience exceeded your own understanding. And if you believe that the most exceptional people are often those who don't need to advertise their capabilities, hit that subscribe button to support our channel. Every story reminds us that extraordinary abilities often hide behind ordinary professional roles, and that the people we notice least may be the ones with the most to teach us. We'll see you in the next story, where we'll discover another incredible tale of hidden expertise and unexpected revelation.